So, welcome, and we're well overdue for introductions if you've ever bothered to look at the shit that I've been posting, which is highly doubtful considering the lack of viewers. But I will first iterate that this is not about viewers. I'm not aiming to be an influencer. What I'm trying to do is demystify a lot of things that I've had to figure out on my own as I get into a hobby. So, we'll start with what the fuck is that hobby? So, I love anime. I've been an anime consumer since Crunchyroll came into existence, and long before that, when Databayo was doing fan service translations, way back into the college years for someone who had still had hair. Um, and I love anime figures. What I really loved was a lot of the garage kits that you could have gotten out of China. And the reason you had to get them out of China is because they were technically licensed material, and there's a lot of laws about licensed material. So that all came to a halt earlier this year for a number of reasons. If you're not familiar, a lot of stuff changed in the Chinese market about what they can and cannot produce. And I'm not going to lie, I was buying adult figures. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm an adult. Fuck off if you got a problem with it. But internally, Chinese law basically started cracking down on that, and they said they couldn't ship these anymore. Some studios were trying to kind of fly under the radar. Some, just shut down. And the ones that didn't shut down and kept trying to were now also dealing in 2025 with tariffs. Tariffs earlier in this year were up to 150% in some cases. So, like, if you'd spent $300 on a figure, you were looking at a really expensive endeavor to import that. So I looked at the cost benefit and said, I could buy an Elegoo or any resin, any SLA printer, essentially, and print the figures if I can get the STLs. But then the harder part is that would mean I'd have to paint them. Now, I have no foundation or background in printing. I worked at 3D Systems for years, so I'm familiar with stereolithography and SLS. I primarily work with SLS, but there's no consumer affordable SLS solution. Even then, I wouldn't have used SLS just because polyamide plastics, when they're sintered like that, soak up fluids, including paints. Not going to do that. So SLA made the most sense. But I've never owned a printer before or printed. I'd never worked with STLs before beyond just knowing they were an input for printers. And beyond that, I was not a painter. Like, my brother, great artist, has amazing, dexterity and an eye, understands color. I fucking don't. That's not me. So this was a journey for trying to take a figure that you like and then externalizing it, putting it into the world, painting it, and then settling and being good with it. And I apparently don't suck a giant bag of donkey dicks at painting. I'm not great, but it's not because I have talent. It's just because I already invested a lot of time into printing this fucking thing and all the little bits of painting. So I've learned a lot along the way. And one of the things I've found is a lot of people were asking, like, hey, how did you do this or how did you do that? So it was recommended that maybe you should start doing some videos about your process or how you approach things, because I do have a very different take on painting, especially figures, miniature figures from a lot of the big players like Mamicon and El Miniaturista. I have a wildly different approach, and it's probably just because I'm a lazy fuck, but it might also have to do with the fact that the perspectives are different. A lot of the people in the painting community are focused on miniature figurines, like if you play Warhammer, things at a small scale. These figures range from 1/6 scale to technically 1/1 scale, although it's pretty rare to find a 6 foot tall figure. They do exist. They're inanely expensive, but normally 1/6 to 1/4. 1/4 is the upper size. They're just large figures, and there's a lot of area to cover. So I tend to rely on airbrushing more than painting, because when I have large volumes to cover, it's about covering that area first, covering it uniquely or uniformly, and then doing the detail work with the paints after that. So it's just a different approach. I'm technical by nature. I was a software developer for years, but I'm used to process development and explaining things to people, so it's probably not a bad fit. I'm also a coarse motherfucker, and I don't care what I say for the most part, so just you just get to accept that. But the thing is, I'm here to explain a lot of things that people deal with. And one of the big things is the process. Like, it is very easy when you're painting a figure to look at it and be like, how fucking drunk was I when I was doing this? Because you're in the middle of a process. You're not at the beginning. You're not at the end because you're asking yourself, why does this look so terrible? And we have a bad tendency, unless you're a visionary and you're used to thinking like this, to just say, this is crap. This isn't what I wanted. I'm going to just toss this. And then you never get past that. So I really want to express to people that it's like, as it was explained to me, trust the process. Like, now the process will suck. You have to love this. Because if you're like me, I don't have a lot of fine motor control. And half of my time is spent fixing every fuck up from every single other correction that I was trying to make along the way until you get to where you want. So basically, painting for me is like a bad Final Fantasy fetch quest where you're like, I just need to talk to the king. And he's like, oh, kill 50 wolves. And while you're doing that, they're like, ooh, wolves are protected species. You know, it can feel like that. But you will get to a point, and I've seen this in software development, I've seen this in music, where all of a sudden it has an internal shape. And you can kind of grasp onto it, and then it all makes sense. And it's about getting to that point and just kind of giving yourself the freedom and the grace to get there. So that's the purpose of this page and Echo and Obsidian Studios, is to help people get into this space without worrying about what people will inevitably go through, which is like, I suck at this. You don't. I can guarantee you I've seen far worse, and I have done far worse. There's a great meme out there where it's like, it's the girl from the Titanic. I can't remember her name. And she, in the original line, is like, paint me like one of your French girls. And she instead says, paint me like one of your figurines. And just has these googly eyes on it. That is wildly accurate. But it's about evolution. It's not like that because everyone's bad. It's just because we're new at this. And it's an evolutionary step. I learned I suck at painting eyes. So you know what I do? I don't paint eyes. I learned to water slide them instead. So I'll design them in high detail in Inkscape or any vector graphic design, scale that down, print that onto water slide paper, and then slide that onto the primed figure. That's how the professionals do it. When you buy expensive figures, whether it's from garage kit manufacturers or the big ones, they're not painting those because that's time and it's hard to be reproducible at that scale. So they'll opt to water slide those if they're not actually just plopped on, not via water slide, but just in paint at one time in the manufacturing factory. So it's about learning where your weaknesses are and just working around them. Nothing you can't do will keep you from being able to produce a figure. It's just, how do I work around this? So I'm in this for the long haul, and you just got to be prepared that I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I am going through this just as much as you. I'm just a little bit further along in said journey. So you'll hear a lot of, fuck, goddamn, what the hell was that? And that's natural because we're going to fuck shit up, but that's just part of the process.